Okay, so we've got our axles prepared now. The next step in the process is preparing the wheels. The wheels that are available now, the newer style wheels, are much better than the older ones. The wheels that are legal in our council are the ones, the Grand Prix wheels here. You can see they're available at the Scout shops for about $2 a set. They come with a set of axles as well. The newer wheels don't have that injection molding dot on the outer tread. The injection molding is actually on the inside of the wheel. There's actually 3 points that the plastic is injected, so we don't have to deal with that mold anymore, but the wheels still are not perfect. And I'm going to show you here relatively inexpensively and relatively quickly how to make this wheel a lot rounder and a more consistent roll for your car, which should translate into more speed. A couple of things here. What we'll be using here is this is a Pro wheel mandrel. We'll be using, it's a Derby Works item. It's about $10 in the Scout shops, in the hobby shops, online, so forth and so on. It's a very nice tool. I'm just using a standard tabletop drill press here. One of the things you want to do before you start is to make sure your drill press is square. And by doing that, I just use a pin here and I double check that my drill press is 90 degrees to my table on both sides. So that's all good, and then we'll go ahead and put the mandrel in and get started. Okay, our mandrel is installed in the drill press now. The items I'm going to be using here, this is a steel block I use. I got from a machine shop here in town. What I like about it is it's relatively small, but it's extremely square. Remember, we want to have a square surface that we're going to be putting the sandpaper on. These are the sandpapers I use typically. We start out with a 400 grit, we go to a 600, we go to an 800, and then we'll go to 1000. If you want to go further, that's great. You're just going to have a smoother wheel, and that's a great thing. Less friction, more speed. What I'm going to do here is just to show you how these wheels come to you. I've made a series of hash marks around this wheel. I'm using a yellow wheel today, just so you can kind of see, but we're making little hash marks here with a permanent marker, and as we go through the process you'll see some of those marks disappear in spots and not others, and that kind of shows you how the wheels really aren't as round as you think they are. So we'll go ahead and get this in and we'll get started. One other thing, we're using a wet sanding technique. All the sandpapers I'm using today are wet dry sandpapers. They're designed actually to be used with some sort of lubricant, in this case water. So I've got a disposable cup here with some water and about 1 drop of dishwashing soap in it. The soap helps things go along a little smoother, helps some of the plastic shavings come off of the sandpaper. So we'll get set up here and we'll get started. Okay, we've got our 400 grit sandpaper just mounted to our block here. These are 1 by about 6-inch strips I have here, and you can see it's wet, and we just dip it into the water solution there and get it nice and wet, and all we're going to do is make very light sweeping passes from front to back alongside the wheel, and we'll run a few passes with the 400 and we'll stop it and see what progress we've made. You can already see on the sandpaper here some of the plastic that's been removed thus far. I'll add a drop or 2 of water with my finger periodically just to keep the sandpaper nice and moist. Okay, let's turn off that machine, and okay, now you can start to see some of the marks are starting to disappear in spots, but they're not in others, and so we just keep going until those marks disappear. This is what I talked about. The wheels are technically round, but they're not very true. When you have your Pinewood Derby car running on 4 true wheels, it's going to be a smoother ride and a faster ride. So we're going to keep working here with our grits of sandpaper until those lines disappear, and then we'll start progressing to the finer sandpapers to get a smoother finish on it. Remember to keep the sandpaper moist. Okay, let's see where we're at here now. Okay, now you can see most of the marks are gone now. We started out with the little hash marks. You can barely see a little hint of one there. That's no big deal. One thing you saw me do is take the sandpaper off of the block, and I just barely push down on the inner edge of the wheel with my finger. That inner edge is also can be kind of rough. It can have a little burr and a ring on it. Sooner or later on the way down the track, your Pinewood Derby car is going to touch that center rail. So the smoother that inside surface of that wheel is, the less friction you're going to create by doing so. You can't get around it. Your car's going to touch it no matter whether you want it to or not. So in doing so, with each grit, what I'll do is I'll just run that along lightly with my finger and make sure it's nice and wet, and put a little gentle pressure on it, and that'll clean up that inner edge so that that's nice and smooth just like the tread is. So we're done with the 400 grit. We'll move on to the 600 grit here and keep going. Now you can really start seeing the plastic come off on the paper now. It makes a nice little strip, and like I said, you dip that in your water a little bit and kind of work it around. A lot of that plastic will fall off, and you're good to go again. Okay, that's looking nice and yellow. I don't see any indications that our Sharpie marker is still on there, so we know we're cleaning the outer tread up nicely. So we're going to go ahead and go with the 800 grit. But before we do that, we're going to take the 600 back out, and we're going to go on that inner hub again. There we go. Again, you can see the plastic that's coming off. You're making that wheel a little truer each pass, and you're also going to make that wheel smoother and the finish better also. Okay, that's looking really good. That's looking really nice. Now we're going to finish up with the 1000 grit. You can go a lot finer than 1000 grit. At times I've actually went all the way to 2000 and 2500 grit sandpaper. You can find that at your automotive parts stores. They use it for painting automobiles, so they use those real fine grits, so that's available there if you choose to do so. Okay, we finished with 1000 grit. All of the Sharpie marks are gone. We'll take this out of the chuck here and take it off of the mandrel. And you can see what a nice looking wheel you get. And the great thing about this is that this wheel is nice and true. It's concentric, and it's about as accurate a Pinewood Derby wheel you're going to get. And I personally think this is the best way to do wheels. I'm not a big fan of lathing and machining and shaving wheels. I think this is a much more cost-effective way to do it. If you don't have a drill press, ask around. I'll bet you're going to find somebody that does. So there are some other things you can do to this as well. The inner hub here is pretty rounded, But Derby Works makes a tool. It's called a hub tool, and Pro Hub tool, and you can actually use the same sandpaper you used on the outer tread here to make this surface smoother. And again, if the wheel touches the side of your car, it's going to reduce that friction. Reducing the friction always means more speed, and that's what we're after here. So you do those two things and you'll end up with that little bit of edge you might need to get to the finish line first. So thanks for watching.